This Torah portion is called Va-yigash, which means, and he approached. As you recall from the last Torah portion, Joseph's servant caught up with the brothers and brought them back into Joseph's house under the pretense of Benjamin having stolen Joseph's silver goblet. And also he returned all of the money into all of the brothers' saddlebags. So the brothers are standing in front of Joseph, who's accused them of stealing from him. And Judah approaches. He comes near to Joseph and pleads for mercy. The main thing he's pleading for is for Joseph to release Benjamin, because he knows if Benjamin, being the remaining son of Rachel, Jacob's favorite wife, that it would kill Jacob, their father. And he offers himself in exchange to be a slave perpetually in place of Benjamin. So it's a heartfelt argument, persuasive, and it breaks down Joseph, who begins to cry after he dismisses everyone else from the quarters, and he reveals himself as their brother Joseph. So this whole thing is very interesting, because if I were Joseph, I would be angry at the brothers for having thrown him in the pit, selling him to the Ishmaelites to become a slave in Egypt, and all of the travails that he encountered while in Egypt. But at the same time, things worked out for the best, and he's the second in charge in Egypt behind Pharaoh. So Joseph is pretty clear and states, "You all meant me ill, but God meant it for good in order for me to sustain you during this famine." So the brothers are blown away. Joseph tells them to go up to Canaan, to get their father Jacob, and to bring him and the household down to Egypt, because there's going to be 5 more years of famine, and there's going to be at least an adequate amount of food in Egypt. Pharaoh and his court hear about the brothers having come, and the Pharaoh is quite pleased and commands Joseph to go up to Canaan with a bunch of carts and to bring Jacob and his family down to Egypt, where Pharaoh promises him the best of the land of Egypt, which is a part of the country called Goshen, which is good pasture land. So in preparation for sending everyone back to Canaan, Joseph again lavishes favor on the youngest, Benjamin. He gives him a lot more money, more changes of clothes. So one of the things that is a recurring theme is whether or not the brothers have repented of the evil that they did to Joseph. And Maimonides spells out a number of criteria for repenting. One of them is to admit that you've done wrong, which the brothers have done a couple of times now, to feel bad about it, which they did. Another criterion is to make recompense if possible. And another is, if you're given the same set of circumstances, will you repeat the evil deed or not? So by favoring Benjamin, he's giving the brothers an opportunity to be angry at Benjamin like they were with Joseph for being Jacob's favorite. But this time they are cool and they don't give Benjamin a hard time. Nevertheless, as Joseph is sending them off, he tells them not to trouble themselves on the way back to Canaan, which might be understood to be, don't give Benjamin a hard time for being favored. So the brothers all come back to Canaan, to Jacob, and he doesn't believe them, that Joseph is still alive and is the master of the country. But then he looks up and looks around and he sees all the carts full of good things, and he does believe it. So he begins making his way down to Egypt with his household, which is fairly extensive by now. And he stops on the way to sacrifice to God, who appears to him in visions of the night. So it's a prophetic experience. And God tells Jacob not to fear about going down to Egypt, that he will make Jacob into a great nation while in Egypt, and that God will go with him and bring him back up to Canaan after he dies. And the information of the vision ends with God saying that Joseph will place his hand on his eyes, in other words, to close his eyes after he dies. There's no mention about the Egyptian bondage, which goes on for 400 years or so, but it's completely positive prophetic message. So they relocate, and there's a census, more or less, of the people in Jacob's household, including Joseph and his 2 sons. For whatever reason or reasons, the wives are not included in the census, and there's 70 people who make the trip down to Egypt. Before they all arrive, Jacob sends Judah to scout out the land of Goshen in order to see what they need to do in order to comfortably settle there. There's a tearful reunion between Joseph and Jacob, and it's going to be the case that the Pharaoh wants to meet Joseph's family. So in order to prevent the Pharaoh from recruiting from the brothers to be court officials or whatnot, because obviously Joseph comes from good stock, Joseph instructs the brothers to emphasize that they're shepherds and cattlemen, because that was the lowliest of the professions in Egypt. So he picks a number of the brothers to appear in front of Pharaoh, and they say, "We deal with livestock." Sorry, that was the Toyota guys. Oil change. So they also emphasize that they're only coming down to Egypt in order to graze their animals because of the famine in Canaan. In other words, they explain that they aren't interested in settling into Egypt for the long run. But that doesn't turn out to be quite the case. So after the brothers leave the presence of the Pharaoh speaks to Joseph, and he says, "In the future, if any of your brothers are interested in an official position in the court, let me know." So Joseph also introduces Jacob, his father, to Pharaoh. The only question the Pharaoh asks Jacob is, "How old are you?" Obviously, Jacob looks old. He's had a hard life. And he is old. At the time of these introductions, he's 137 years old. And Jacob also says that his years have been bad and few compared to those of his fathers, in other words, Abraham and Isaac. Interestingly enough, upon greeting Pharaoh and upon leaving Pharaoh, Jacob blesses him. I suppose for good reason. He's made Joseph the vice Pharaoh and has brought them all down to sustain them during the famine. So the famine is in the 2nd or 3rd year now, and even though there's food stored in the storehouses, it's still pretty hard going in Egypt. So the Egyptians spend all their money buying food. If they run out of money, they give Joseph or the state all of their livestock in exchange for food. And then finally, they give their land to Pharaoh through Joseph. And interestingly, Joseph resettles the Egyptians after they sell their land in order for the point to be made that they no longer are bound to their land. So they exchange the land for seed, and they start to grow seed or plant things in other parts of the country than where they were originally from. The only population of Egyptians which are spared all of these ignominies are the priests, who seem to have a ongoing in perpetuity stipend from pharaohs, so they don't have to sell anything. They're protected. Another part of the deal is that the Egyptians need to give 1/5 of all of their produce to Pharaoh as a tithe or as a tax, and they're able to keep 4/5. Well, so Jacob's family relocates to Goshen, and they're fruitful and they multiply. So that's the end of this Torah portion. The next one is Va-yigash, and he lived, which refers to the end of Jacob's life. And then that's the end of the book of Genesis. So I hope you liked this video. If you do, please click like and subscribe. And until next time, thank you. Bye.